Hello, Pittsburgh. I'm Zach Gibson, and this is TribLive's From the Newsroom podcast, bringing you top stories from TribLive.com. We're halfway through January. This is right around the time that many people start to slack on their New Year's resolutions, or forego them altogether. As a matter of fact, this past Friday is known as Quitter's Day, the day that most people give up on their New Year's resolutions. One common resolution that has gained traction and trendiness over the recent years is Dry January, where individuals abstain from alcohol for the first month of the year. Today, I'm speaking with JoAnne Harrop, a TribLive reporter and author of A Daughter's Promise, who, through research and interviews, found that Dry January could lead to sobriety year-round. We'll also talk about what she learned and the modern experience for many on the sober and recovery journey. Hi, JoAnne.
How are you doing, Zach?
I am doing great. It is a cold Wednesday afternoon, but it's warm inside the office, so I'm doing all right.
I totally agree. And it's only going to get colder with some more snow tomorrow, I think.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to it. But that's January, and with January comes New Year's resolutions. So do you have any coming up or that you're working on this month?
For me personally, well, I'm trying to do some sort of fitness thing every day, even if it's taking the stairs instead of the elevator or lifting weights for 5 or 10 minutes. I do walk on the weekends, but during the week it's a lot harder. So trying to just do little things like that. And so far I've made it, but we're just on the 15th, as you mentioned.
Right. I personally am trying to read a little bit more and limit my time on social media. Now, with my job as digital content producer, it's not the easiest thing to do, but we're making it.
I totally understand. And you know what? You might want to read my book. That'll give you something to read.
Yeah, I can add it to my reading list. So, like I said in the intro, this past Friday was Quitter's Day, the day that most people are likely to drop their New Year's resolutions. I didn't actually start my New Year's resolution on January 1st. I waited a week before I started, and I think that might be helping me get past the drag of it. But how are you doing now that it's the halfway point?
I'm doing well with it. I mean, I haven't missed a day, but what I've done is, I've kept it sort of manageable, and I think that's part of it too. Where, yeah, I'm not going to say I'm going to walk 5 miles every day because I don't have the time to do that, and I'd probably make it 2 days and not finish it. So I think for me, I'm doing it sort of in smaller chunks, and that's helped me so far. But check with me on the 31st, I guess.
All right. So let's get into this story. Now, we're talking about Dry January, and you gave your readers an interesting lens to look at the practice. You introduced this topic with someone who already abstains constantly.
Yes, I did. And with a story like this, sometimes you go in thinking that it's going to be one way. And once you start interviewing people, turns out to maybe have a different angle. And I think that's what happened with this story. So the person that you're referring to, who I started the story with, is Scott Page. And he was one of the final people who I interviewed. But I thought that his story was very interesting. And he talked about when he was trying to stop drinking, not just for Dry January, that he avoided even being around it. So not going to bars and restaurants because he knew himself. And I think that's a lot of this story too. Like, different people handle it differently. So you know who you are, and you know like what's going to trigger you or what's going to bother you and what's not. So I think you kind of have to really look inside yourself when you're doing something like this. So that's why I started with him.
Okay. So a little bit about Scott. He, as you said, avoided being in bars. As a matter of fact, he avoided non-alcoholic drinks altogether for 3 years and didn't go out much. In a quote from your story, he says, quote, "I was worried it could be triggering for me. 1 drink is too many and 100 is not enough. I need help from rehab professionals to stay sober because I do Dry January every day of the year," end quote. Page tells us that the potential influence of social situations where alcohol is present could have been triggering for him. Now, you spoke to experts that say that this is not unusual.
That's correct. I talked with the director of the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, and I talked with one of our local rehabilitation experts, Ron Cambest, and he's based out of Washington, Pennsylvania, which is not that far from where we are at the Trib. And, both of them said that products that look or even taste similar to alcohol containing beverages could be enough to trigger a craving in someone. So say someone like myself, I drink a Cosmopolitan. So for someone in recovery or someone just maybe starting a dry January, if they were to order a mocktail, which is a cocktail without the alcohol, they're going to taste some of the same ingredients. So that cranberry juice is in there. There's a lime, either a piece of lime or some lime juice. And so that could be triggering for someone who's trying to give up the alcohol. And, another, just back to my other point, you kind of have to know yourself. You have to know, is that going to bother me? Or maybe try it and kind of see how you react to it.
Both of these experts tell us that addiction is based on a memory and reward system, and social situations where everyone is drinking can directly influence someone in recovery. So in another instance, we meet Haley Phillips as part of this story, who resonated with this and had to relearn how to be around people who drink after starting her own journey.
What I thought was interesting about Haley is, and she told me that initially some of her first jobs were working in a bar as a bartender. And I think that could be a whole nother story from this. Mm-hmm. But, when you are a bartender, you're serving drinks, you're around drinks all the time. The bar is closed and you're putting things away and the alcohol is there. She had said that so many times she would meet with her coworkers and even friends after bar hours, or after the bar she was working at closed and they went to another one, and she couldn't just stop at one. And she knew that she had to do something, and she decided that she was going to start her sobriety journey in dry January, which I thought was interesting. So that was back in 2019, and she's been doing it ever since, and I'm really impressed with her.
Reading your story, she attributes this growth of being able to be around people in drinking situations to her work at the Open Road, a retail shop. Can you tell me a little bit about the Open Road?
The Open Road is amazing. I met the owner, and when I was talking with her, it was located in Arlington, part of Pittsburgh, and she is planning on moving to the Garfield area. Right now, it's temporarily inside the Lawrenceville Hemp Company, which is in Lawrenceville. Mm-hmm. And hopefully moving in the next couple of weeks to its own space in Garfield. But I could not believe how many different choices there are of non-alcoholic beer, non-alcoholic spirits, non-alcoholic wine, pre-made mocktails that are for purchase, which tells me that there's demand for this. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of companies out there that say, I might make a beer with alcohol, but now I'm going to try to make a non-alcoholic beer because the demand is there. And I went to this shop, and there were people that were coming in, buying it for different reasons. And we can probably get to that at another time. But I think it's great to have a place like the Open Road, because you can still buy a drink if you want and still be able to socialize with people and not feel like that you're different.
Mm-hmm. Now, that last thing you said, feeling like you're different, there is clearly a social aspect to the action and practice of drinking in public spaces. When it comes to combating the social influence of drinking, Scott Page, as we mentioned earlier, created a social experience that doesn't have drinking at its center. Can you tell me about this teetotal initiative?
I can definitely do that. Scott was saying, as we talked earlier, that, he made sure to stay away from anything that would be triggering for him. And that meant not even going to a lot of restaurants and bars and social activities. And he said he was feeling isolated. And he said, I can imagine there are other people who were feeling isolated like I was. So he co-founded Teetotal Initiative with a friend. And what they do is they create events like you would have with drinking, although without drinking. So, they do crafting events, they go bowling, they have picnics. I mean, they do things that you would do socially with alcohol, but they do it without alcohol. And he said it's just been great to get back out and live his life, because he said he was spending so many nights at home because he didn't want to be triggered by being in a bar or being around other people who were drinking. So, it's great that he decided that it's not just about him, that he's going to help other people too.
Now, with this initiative, Paige and his friend took initiative to combat the common causes of relapse, which, like he mentioned in his personal experience, isolation, boredom, and loneliness. All of these things are helping to really shine a light and address the stigma of non-drinkers interacting in a space with alcoholic drinks. Your interviews reveal that this is becoming more common and even aided by new practices at some bars.
That is correct. Two Phrase Brewing, which is located in Garfield, when the owners purchased the brewery, the taproom manager was saying that they really wanted to do something to help, whether it's people in recovery, people trying dry January, or just people. Not everyone can drink alcohol. Maybe it affects them physically. One woman who I interviewed, she's diabetic, and so there's a lot of sugar in alcohol. So it's not even just that it's somebody who abuses alcohol. It's somebody who just, either doesn't want to drink, or there's some reason that they're not going to drink. And so Two Phrase Brewery has decided that one Monday a month, they remove all the alcohol from their tap room, and they have all non-alcoholic beverages. And during the month of January, because it's dry January, they do this every Monday. And that way, when you go in there, there's hopefully nothing that's going to upset you or trigger you if you see something alcoholic, because you're not going to see something alcoholic. It's all non-alcoholic, and it opens up to a nice social situation, like you were talking about, with sometimes just feeling isolated or feeling like different because you're not drinking.
Okay. Now, this is something that I personally haven't seen very widely as an experience for a lot of breweries. So I think it's very commendable that they are trying to really create a space where people can come out at a commonly shared space by people who drink and people who don't drink and have a shared experience. A quote from your story from the taproom manager: "We see people crying because they are happy and feel comfortable. They get emotional because they may not have been in a bar or a brewery in a long time. Some people don't want to be around other people drinking alcohol." Now, in your story, you tell us that more than 10% of consumers who are likely to take part in Dry January said they're more motivated by a better range of non-alcoholic options. A lot of businesses are starting to take a look at this new market where it doesn't always have to be alcoholic beer or alcoholic beverages as the option.
And I think, and that goes back to when I was talking about the open road. I mean, there's a need for this. So the open road sees it. That's why they created a separate business for it. Mel Babbitts is the owner. And I think a lot of bars and restaurants are also, they're also, I think a lot of bars and restaurants are also noticing this. I know I've gone into several, and they will have a list of non-alcoholic options. And I don't remember, like 5 or 10 years ago, I don't remember that. I mean, they would make something if you asked them, but you see it on menus now. And I think that bars want to take away that stigma where if you're sitting at the bar, you have to have an alcoholic drink. You can sit at the bar, get yourself a non-alcoholic drink, order some food, watch a game. That's the experience. And it's, I think more and more we all care about inclusion. And this is a way to include everyone and make them feel comfortable. And it's, maybe that's the reason Dry January is more popular. I don't know. But I think something like that can only be positive.
All right. Now, speaking of the popularity of Dry January and learning about this Dry January experience through this story, you decided to try out Dry January for yourself. So how has it been for you so far?
I did try it, and I am still doing it. I'll tell you what, it's been a learning experience. I was out with some friends last week, and there were 5 of us at the table, and 3 were drinking. And I noticed that. Like, I noticed who was ordering a drink, what they were drinking, how many more drinks they ordered. And it's just it's a change in mindset. I think, I think it makes me maybe more empathetic towards someone who's either trying to stop drinking, whether it's for a medical reason, whether it's someone like Scott Page who feels like, I can't just have one, it's got to be more than one. And I think it's, they always say, like, you don't think about what someone's going through until you walk in their shoes. And I think that's part of what I've learned so far. And I also learned that, I don't need a drink to have a good time. Like, I'm more mature than I was years ago, obviously. I mean, I'm in my 60s now, but I think that thinking has to change too, where, it's great if you want to have a drink, and moderation is very important in whatever it is that you do. And I totally believe in that. So I'm pretty confident that I'll make it till the 31st without a drink, but it has been a learning experience, and I'm glad I'm doing it.
Okay. So my final question for you is, would you recommend Dry January for others who are looking to either practice moderation, take a break from alcohol itself, or just try something to give a New Year's resolution a try?
I definitely would recommend it, because I think, like I said earlier, like you until you try something, you don't really know what someone else is going through. So, and this is, this is sort of a snapshot of a big picture of someone who's trying to totally stop drinking. But I think it gives you an idea of what that's like, what a social situation is like. We're just coming off the holidays when so many things are based around drinking and food, which could be a whole nother story. Maybe I'll look into that story at some point as well. But, I think that the best way even to write about a story is to experience it.
Okay. Well, JoAnne, thank you for coming on and bringing this very interesting story.
Thank you for having me, Zach. And if you want to read some more stories that I've written or will write in the future, you might want to check out my author page. And also don't forget about my book, A Daughter's Promise. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining. If you enjoyed this week's episode, share the podcast to help keep Western PA locally informed with insightful discussion and the latest news from your area. It's an easy way to spread the word, and it helps our podcast reach more people like you. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify and turn on episode notifications so you never miss new content. Once again, I'm Zach Gibson, and this is From the Newsroom.